We were ruined by getting involved in that war in Indochina, which we had no business getting into. We're now being ruined in a similar way by the British in Afghanistan. Idiocy, insanity. We don't really need to make wars. We may have to use military force, but actually today, as the way it stands today, if we do the right thing, we do not need wars. We may need certain special actions, short-term special actions, but we won't need wars. You want to fight a general war? You want to fight a nuclear war? You want to fight a thermonuclear war? You want to fight a war of diseases, plagues? You want to call out for all-out war in the world? No. You may have to discipline a certain part of the world and bring peace. But you're in there to bring peace and enforce the peace. Not to fight general wars. And we're used by the British Empire, or what the real empire is, to get us to do foolish things, to get into foolish quarrels with people who may be problematic, but there's a better way to deal with the thing. And people are ambitious to fight these wars. And sometimes the folly is crystal clear. A piece of insanity beyond, and the president makes it even worse than McChrystal did, and his crowd. So that's our problem. We are a nation based on a European cultural basis, a basis which was defined by the circles of Nicholas of Cusa, who was the central figure in the architect of modern European science and culture. And the effort was when what happened with Constantinople and following that, when Europe was going back into disgusting conditions again after the Renaissance. They said, go across the oceans, meet people across the oceans, and take our cultural achievements with us to these people. But don't take our diseases, our political diseases, with you. And that, in effect, was done. And we, with this picture, which I've given some general outline to, we, in a sense, produced a nation, which is the only possible rallying point still today to save this planet from hell. Without this nation, you cannot organize the world to avoid the hell that's coming down on it now. Without this United States. And we have to deal with our United States as an instrument for that purpose. We have to have a presidency, a presidential system, and we don't have a congressional system. We have a presidential system. And the congressional function is a part of the presidential system. It's not an independent factor. We need a presidential system that functions. And we're going to have to put this president either in a cage inside the Oval Office, probably with rubber walls, and somehow get a presidency. And if he can't do that, we're going to have to replace him. Because without a functioning presidency of the United States, I don't see much of a chance for civilization in the period today. I don't believe in making promises that are not feasible, and I don't see a possibility. Under this president, in his present behavior, I don't see any chance for the United States or the world. Now, what I've done is to propose some time ago that we get certain people in Russia, China, and India, and the United States as a block of nations around which combined are sufficiently powerful as a combination to force the needed changes on a planetary level. In other words, by net changes, I don't mean jobs. You know, the idea of giving somebody a job to rake leaves is not exactly an economic development program. What we need is production jobs. We need nuclear power. We need a national rail system. We need a space program, a real space program, revived. Because we don't have factories of any significance anymore. We shut them down. Especially under George W. Bush Jr. and this thing there. They've shut it down. What happened to the automobile industry? What's happened to the aircraft industry? Go to all the high-tech industries we had. What happened to them? They're gone. We still have the knowledge of that technology, but we are losing the people who are able to practice it. We have jobs, yes. What are jobs worth? Raking leaves? You build a world by raking leaves or doing social work? No, you build industries. Today that means, for example, nuclear power. Technologically, it's impossible to develop the population of this planet without nuclear power on an extensive basis. And that's not enough. What you have to count on is higher energy flux density. You have to increase the energy flux density of the power in the hands of labor. If you can't do that, you cannot achieve the productivity necessary to save this nation and save the world. We talk about a vast program of this. We have to go to space. We have to undertake the industrialization of the moon. Because if we don't do the industrialization of the moon, we can't get to Mars. And if we can't get to Mars, which may take several generations to do that with human beings, we can get there already with the slow craft, 300 days or something like that. But if you're going to bring human beings there, you've got to talk about a mere few days between moon orbit and Mars orbit. And that involves some problems. But we pretty much shut down NASA, which was the mission orientation for that sort of thing. Now, the Mars project is necessary for humanity in the sense that humanity functions on the basis of something about human beings which animals don't have. The animal world has creativity and the development of species, new species, varieties, and so forth. Even the non-living world undergoes development. The universe, the physical universe, is undergoing development all the time. But it has no will to develop. It has no knowledgeable will to choose to develop. It develops because the creativity is built into the universe. Man is different. Man has the willful creativity to shape the universe. And therefore, man cannot function without having the inspiration to use that ability, that creative power, to achieve higher goals than are currently practiced. For example, we have a planet of very poor people. In Asia in particular, in Africa, a terrible mass of poor people. We're running short of many resources. We have to create new resources. We have to increase the productive powers of labor of the existing population. We have 6.7 billion people now on this planet. We're headed towards 7. We have to progress to meet that challenge. We have to inspire our people in each in their own culture to take this mission orientation for mankind as their responsibility. In order to challenge people, what do? Well, you educate them. And you adopt missions which make goals, higher goals, clear to those people. And children say, I want to do this. We had back in the 1960s, even into the beginning of the 70s, you had children who were saying, I want to go into space. The moon landing program of NASA was an inspiration. The Russian-Soviet program was also an inspiration to the planet. You have to have these kinds of goals of missions for mankind to use his creative powers to raise humanity to a higher level of existence. You have to talk to your children and grandchildren about this kind of goal. And it's only when you get their imagination stirred that they become creative. And without the bestirring that creativity, mankind does not progress. And that's what we used to say about the United States. We were a nation that was committed to that sort of thing. What we did under Franklin Roosevelt was an example of a nation which had been crushed under a legacy of Teddy Roosevelt and Wilson and similar types of scoundrels. We were almost destroyed. But we rebuilt, and facing the challenge of the war in Europe and the challenge of unemployment, the challenges here, we mobilized our people to create a machine which is the most powerful machine the world had ever seen. The machinery of the United States, which was deployed for World War II. The intention was to continue the development of that machine in the post-war period Not for war purposes, but for construction of the planet. Roosevelt had a clear plan for this thing. Truman had a different idea. Truman kissed the butt of Winston Churchill. And we've been getting the backlash from that ever since. We destroyed most of our capability. We destroyed our industries. We just shut them down. We had all kinds of projects, for post-war projects, which would have led to great achievements. And we shut them down. Nuclear power was one example of this thing. It was feasible, principally. Sometimes it takes you a couple of generations. Once an idea is clear and feasible, it may take you 2 or 3 generations to actually bring it online as effective. But the way in which to organize mankind, 2 questions. First, we have to understand culture. We have to understand national cultures in particular. Because national cultures embody, within the use of language and other things, embody the herited bits of knowledge and experience of past generations, of that people. Therefore, you cannot go into a country and say you can't create a Tower of Babel, a one world economy. You have to use the culture of the various cultures of the people as your mobilizing force. Because it's in their imagination, which is associated, the powers of imagination associated with their culture, in which they are able to mobilize creativity. So you want to create the opportunity for upgrading them through fostering the benefits of their own creativity and inform them of the objectives that other people are achieving, which they may copy and build upon. So you need a system of sovereign nation states, of sovereign peoples, different cultures, each with its own sovereign expression, and the unity of these people for a common purpose, the purpose of humanity. To do that, you must stir the imagination, the powers of the imagination of the people. And what means reach to space. We're going to Mars. It will probably take us 3 to 4 generations to do that, to solve the scientific problems that are involved in overcoming very high speeds or rates of acceleration in interplanetary travel, which is required for moving mankind around. And this is not easy, but we know we can solve the problem. We just have to go through the steps of solving it. Take us 2 or 3 generations or more, but we'll get there. But as long as we inspire our young people, especially younger people, to look at their adulthood, you've got people in their 20s, they're going to be functioning probably for 50 years to come if we can get Obama out of office. He doesn't seem to be in favor of that sort of thing. And they should be looking forward to what they're going to produce within their own lifetime as benefits for humanity of which they will be proud. It's a span of about 60 years, approximately, that they think in terms. Most people think that way. They live that long. And when people can find a purpose in their life, in the sense that what they are doing now, what they are preparing themselves to accomplish, will lead within their own lifetime to the foundations of something much better than they have today. That's when you can capture and sustain the imagination of a people in its own culture. And when people are united, even they have different cultures, if they're united by a common purpose to do this, to cooperate to do this, then we have peace among nations on this planet. And that should be our goal. It should be our goal now. What seems impossible to small-minded people are the ideas that are necessary to get out of the pit that we're in today. So we're in a very interesting crisis right now. And it started, in a sense, the present crisis in its present form started back in 2007, when I proposed the Homeowners and Bank Protection Act. Now, this act was not adopted because of people like Barney Frank, and he was up front on this sort of thing. And Barney's a funny guy. We never been able to determine exactly what language he speaks, but we know he's there, and we're not too pleased by it. Anyway, so they led the charge on opposing the installation of my Homeowners and Bank Protection Act. 2007. And there were many people in leading positions, including governors of states in the United States, who were prepared to move to push that act forward. And it could have been implemented in the autumn, by the autumn of 2007. What Barney Frank and his cohorts did was exactly the opposite. They wrecked that. And what became the process of bailout in its early phases, bailing out corrupt banks, bailing out the swindlers of Wall Street, and similar kinds of things, became the objective. They did nothing to stop the loss of homes of American citizens. They did nothing to save jobs, industrial jobs. They did nothing to maintain education. They did nothing to maintain and improve health care. But they went in exactly the opposite direction. And they became slaves of the British Empire, the little tiny queen of the British Empire. And so we have trillions of dollars, tens of trillions of dollars right on the books in the United States of worthless debt, which is imposed upon us on bailout of things which we should let go bankrupt. We don't need Wall Street. This economy doesn't need it. We need a constitutional banking system of the type which Alexander Hamilton prescribed and which is embedded in our Constitution. So why don't we just stick to our Constitution? We are supposed to be not a monetary system. We're not a monetary system. We're a credit system. The government of the United States has a monopoly, constitutionally, on the creation of credit and of public credit. No other institution should be allowed and should go to jail if they try to inflate things by coining their own money, such as by a central bank. That's a swindle. These people belong in jail, and they should have their ill-gotten gains taken away from them. Now, but in this case, these people were able to bail out bankrupt institutions which were hopelessly corrupt and wreck the United States. What do we do about this? The solution is simple. You have to have the guts to do it. If you don't have the guts to do it, you're not going to have a United States. You're not going to have a Europe. You got the guts to do it? Are you worth your salt? Are you going to do it? Put this thing through bankruptcy organization. You take, we have as a precedent with the former Glass-Steagall Act, which was actually nothing but an implementation of a provision of the U.S. federal Constitution. We are a credit system, not a monetary system. Monetary systems are illegal with respect to our Constitution. They were practicing an illegal practice, an unconstitutional practice. Sorry, buddy, we found an honest judge, and you're about to lose all this ill-gotten gains you had. We don't need Goldman Sachs. We don't need these kinds of things that Roosevelt tried to free us from. We don't need them. What we need is a good, sound system of commercial banking system as what we used to understand as the commercial banking standard. But we need to create a credit system under the U.S. federal government and our Constitution, because we're going to have to cancel this $23 trillion of waste paper as debt, just wipe it off the books. And the federal government then has to have a single act rammed through the Congress, which creates a supply of credit for several purposes. One, we don't create jobs. When these guys talk about jobs today, they're talking about handouts, picking up paper, putting your fingers in your nostrils and cleaning out your nostrils, or something like that. It's worthless. We mean productive jobs in certain categories. We don't have an auto industry. We're losing the aircraft industry. We're losing the power industry. We're losing everything that's worthwhile. We're taking people who have skills but are aging, we're throwing them out in the streets. We're threatening them to kill them by health care policies which are intentionally as mass murderous as Adolf Hitler's, which we have on the books right now being voted up or down. We don't need this. What we need is real work. Now, we've got a youth population which is not accustomed to real work. Well, there wasn't the jobs available to get it. We destroyed the auto industry. The apprentice program that went with that is gone. All our high-tech industries are virtually shattered. We have nothing. We've got to build it back again. Therefore, we have to take a number of things that we can do which will recreate the kind of industrial agricultural potential which we formerly had, which we've lost. And we find that we are in the same situation in that respect that you find Russia, the largest nation and area in the world, and some very important features, and China and India and other countries, where they have a very large part of the population which is extremely poor and unskilled. Now, therefore, if we're going to have a future for humanity, we have to solve that problem. And we have to do it in our own country as part of that. And therefore, what we need to do, for example, I have one project for the United States. We've lost most of our industry. Well, we can do one thing. We can do one thing which was international. We can unite Eurasia, Africa, and the Americas. How? By a single rail system. If you build the railway tunnel bridge system to the Bering Straits, which is a well-defined project and a feasible project, you take that area of Siberia, you link it into Alaska, down through Canada, down through the Darien Straits in South America, and down to the tip of South America. You do the same thing in the other direction, in Eurasia, down into Africa. And therefore, you can effectively, for most of this planet, you can now create a high-speed system of mass transportation for passengers and freight, which is more efficient than any short or medium-term aircraft travel, and much more efficient than highway travel in terms of cost and effectiveness. We can do that. We can unite this mega planet, or this mega continent, composed of Africa, the Americas, and Eurasia. And the Australians are eager to cooperate because Australia has a great mass of such things as plutonium and thorium, which are the fine ingredients of nuclear power these days. So therefore, Australia will be invited to contribute its development of its relevant industries in this large area they have for themselves as a nation. And they will have a future in the world by playing this kind of role of cooperation as Australia with Asia in particular. So we can unite the world on the basis of we are going to have a division of labor among respectively sovereign nation states. And how are we going to do it? Well, we're not going to have a monetary system. Monetary systems have to be canceled. And you do that by canceling all the worthless debt around. You like you go into a bank. You go into a bank under Glass-Steagall. You find there are a lot of bad assets in that bank, a lot of bad obligations. And you have the auditors come in for reorganization under Glass-Steagall or similar law, the way Roosevelt did in the original Glass-Steagall operation. And you say, that crap, forget it, it's gone. This is solid. This meets the Glass-Steagall standard for commercial banking or savings banks or similar kinds of banks. That saves. Now, when we clean that mess up, now you turn around and now you create a new debt, which is the federal government authorizes the creation of a mass of utterance of credit. And we invite other nations to do the same thing. Get rid of the monetary system, take the IMF and everything resembling it, and bury it. Take the City of London and bury it. Get rid of it. Then what you do is you now have a system of currencies. Nations have currencies, they're legal currencies. Well, you have to create a fixed exchange rate system. Do you have to figure out how do you calculate that? No, you don't. You take the existing relationships in terms of currencies among nation states with whatever adjustments people think are necessary and equitable, and you simply say, these are credit systems. That is, the currency of that nation belongs to that nation as its authority. The only legal currency is what that nation itself creates as its credit, which then can be capitalized for production. Then we now have to have a system of credit systems, as what Roosevelt had intended in 1944, contrary to what happened under Truman. Eliminate the monetary system entirely. Wipe it out. We now recognize only as a money and credit, only national credit. We eliminate a fact, I'll explain later. And by creating a fixed exchange rate credit system among cooperating nations, you're now ready to go. Now once you've created the credit system under a fixed exchange rate, now you go to treaty agreements on long-term credit agreements across national borders, where nations contract among themselves terms of cooperation over the long term under a fixed exchange rate system. Because the important thing is not what the relative value, nominal value of a currency is. What's important is maintaining a baseline of improvement. And the baseline improvement, you have to get credit. You have to develop various needs. You have to satisfy the physical needs of national development of various nations. And you create a system of credit denominated in terms of like 25 years, 50 years, 100 years in long-term certain projects. And that way we can achieve what has to be achieved. But we have to do something else. We have to mobilize the population and its imagination. Because only the desire for a better future, only goals for a better future, can mobilize a population to be motivated to do what has to be done. We have, just when you put this Mars question, we have to industrialize the moon, which is already a project that's understood. 10 nations are actually concerned with the idea of industrializing the moon. 10 nations that are moon landing oriented. We have to take the moon and make the moon a baseline for things going into space. In other words, you don't want to build up tremendous weight in apparatus on Earth and have to pump that stuff up to the moon. What you do is you take your technology to the moon, and then you find the raw materials on the moon, which you use to build the craft. Now you'll build the craft which will actually take you, or take whatever you want to send, to Mars, that direction. So you have to build an industrialization of the moon. Remember, this is not a new idea. The space pioneers, as early as the immediate post-war period, the 1950s, the United States were already talking about that, as they were in the Soviet Union and in elsewhere. The Mars objective was the objective, the planet Mars. Getting there is going to be complicated. It's going to take a lot of science, a lot of development, but that's our mission. We're thinking ahead. We're not thinking about what we're going to get tomorrow. We're thinking about what our people are going to have 2 or 3 generations ahead. And we're thinking about the purpose in life which we're giving to young people today who are coming out of adolescence, the purpose in life for them. When they ask themselves, to what purpose am I living? Am I living to my satisfaction? Am I an animal? Or am I living for the sake of my coming generations? Am I living for the joy of my old age? Am I living to do the things that will give me joy in my old age? They'll take a grandfather will tell his grandson, I helped build that, and here's what you're going to do in your time. It's that force of imagination. When that becomes the policy of nations, to develop the imagination in this way, the scientific imagination, the cultural imagination, where do we want to go? What do we want to promise to our grandchildren and their grandchildren? What do we expect as goals that we think we can realize in this term of life? How do we have to educate our people? What do we have to do now to give a meaning to life? Not the sense, are we animals that we just eat and have pleasure from one moment to the other? Or are we people who are thinking about humanity, about future generations? are thinking about what we owe to past generations and what we owe to future generations. Do our lives have meaning? Do they have purpose? Or are we just simply silly pleasure seekers or something, entertainment seekers? And the problem we have today is a cultural problem, which is a moral problem, is that under a zero-growth society, a zero-technological growth society, a greeny society, mankind becomes less than an animal in moral value. That's why we have this health care program. What's the health care policy we're getting in Europe? What's the health care policy now in the United States under the Obama administration? Kill people. Reduce the number of people by cutting down the means of life. They're too young, too many babies. They should die. They're too old. We don't want them. They should die. We don't want jobs which require skills, which means we'll be able to produce less. More people should die. The goal of Prince Philip is described in this chapter is to reduce a population of the world from 6.7 billion to 2 or less, maximum of 2. The official policy of the British monarchy is to reduce the world's population from a 6.7 level today of billions to less than 2. That's its policy. That's what the Greenie is all about. That's what the Copenhagen thing is all about. Mass murder. When we're on the road where the population requirements that we must anticipate right now is a world level of population of 7 billion. We have to anticipate that now, in this coming generation. And we have to prepare to be able to meet that challenge. And we can. The point is that you make people creative, you inspire them to be creative, inspire them to see objectives beyond what their habits today, and they will be creative, and they will create the ability to satisfy these goals. And mankind is not going to stick around as being just in the nook of this earth, just some corner of the solar system. Mankind is going out into the universe. If we can have a constantly accelerated flight within our galaxy, men in their own lifetime can explore some distant parts of this galaxy. We can do it. So that, our perspective, we're not going to do this tomorrow, but our perspective has to be that direction. It's what we have to tell to our children and our grandchildren. This is what we must do. And when you capture the imagination of people in a realistic way, this way, then they become moral, because they become inspired to do good. And as you see around us, people want to be entertained. What kind of entertainment do they want? Well, they want to dull their senses with marijuana or some other drugs, or some crazy habit all night with some crazy dancing going on. Crazy invented new sexes or whatever else, other kinds of entertainment they want. They don't have a human purpose in life. They don't have a meaning. They would stand ashamed in front of a court of humanity. You ask them, what was your purpose in life? They say, what's that? They don't have a sense of a purpose in life. And we as human beings all die. No one has invented a non-dying science. Human beings die. Well, what is important about human beings? Is there the fact they die or the fact they're living? No, not that. It's what human beings contribute in the course of their lifetime. And by capturing the imagination of young people in schools, for example, and inspiring them to realize that they can make discoveries, or they can begin by reenacting discoveries which people have made before them, and realize that this human power of creativity, of discovery, is what makes them human and is what gives meaning to their life. That's where you get morality. There's no other way to get it. Otherwise, you're just an animal. If you're not oriented to the future and the development of mankind, what are you? Just an animal. And how does mankind do that? With fire. You know, as I've emphasized repeatedly, contrary to the Greenies, the key evidence in ancient archaeology between a monkey or an ape and a human being is a fireplace. Human beings are the only creatures that use fire. And we not only have fire, burning of wood and coal and so forth, we now have big fire. We have nuclear fire. We have thermonuclear fire. We have hadron collider fire, all this kind of fire. Ever increasingly higher order of energy flux density. And through this, we're able to transform the planet. We're able to use poorer natural resources with the same effect as we once did richer natural resources. We're going to find that we're able to master more and more of the vicinity of Earth in the solar system through the increase of fire, higher fire, nuclear fire, thermonuclear fire, antimatter reaction fire, always more dense. And with that, mankind can do almost anything. So we are that. We are the fire bringers. And by doing that, we increase men's power to exist.